want to talk about something today. I want to reflect on this month of celebrating our ancestry, celebrating our history, and I want to look at it from the perspective of all that God has given us to sustain in the oppression and the difficult times that we face. God enables us to thrive through it because He has given us courageous creativity. And I just want to talk about that for a few moments. I want to talk about courageous creativity. Because when you look at it, that one of the blessings that God has given us as a people is the ability for us to be creative. And this is why when you look at courageous creativity, you move into a place of realizing that truthfully, your back can never be up against the wall. And those of you who get to a place in life where you feel like there is no hope, there is no purpose, there is no reason or no rhyme, I want you to reflect back on how courageous and how creative your ancestors were, your foremothers and your forefathers. Because one of the things that they did not do, they did not make up excuses for why they could not survive. I'm thinking about in my own life how I was able to grow up, and while we were blessed in our home, I did not come from a home where a silver spoon was placed in my mouth. But I saw my parents make things happen creatively. I remember when I was in grade school and all of the other children had beautiful lunch boxes, and they had the designs on the lunch box that was embossed, which means you could run your hand across it and you could feel the figures on the lunch box, and that's when everybody was carrying lunch. But I had to sign up for free lunch. And some of y'all know what that was like when you went through the line and the lady would let everybody in the line know that you was on the free lunch program. And so, but at that time, it was predicated on certain students who needed assistance, certain students who didn't. And so all of my friends, we all on free lunch. And so when there were field trips, everybody else would show up with these beautiful lunch boxes. But because I didn't take lunch every day, my mother, she would get in there and fix me my lunch for the field trip, and she would take whatever I had, whether it was a piece of chicken with some bread, nothing like chicken with soggy bread, piece of chicken with some bread, and she'd wrap it up in wax paper and then wrap it up in foil paper and then put some other little items in there And don't you know that I had to carry a brown bag for my lunchbox? If I would tap into it and then fold it back quite the way, by the time lunch came, I had grease all over my bag. You could see the grease on the outside. But it brought tears to my eyes. Not because I did not have a lunchbox, but I thought about the love and the concern she had to just wrap up my food and properly and as neatly as possible prepare it for me to have lunch. Didn't have lunchbox, but creatively I had a lunch bag. I remember some time ago when we used to make do in the home, and not only in my home but throughout the entire neighborhood. We have not always had a washer and dryer, but some of our people use number 10 tubs. Some of you young people don't know about number 10 tub, but they had numbers on the tub. That's those big aluminum tubs that you was big enough for you to even sit in if you had to wash and to warm up the water. Because you didn't have a hot water heater, you would take the water and put it on the stove and heat it up, and don't let the heat go out. Because creatively they understood that if the heat went out, just turn the oven on and let the oven stay open and let the oven heat up the kitchen area. Some of y'all have never had to do anything like that, but that's creatively how we survived and how we made it. We not always had wash and dryer and put your clothes in the dryer and wash every day of the week. That was not always the case, but there were what they call clotheslines that they put outside. And in the backyard, we used to have a clothesline. And I remember after my mother would wash, she would go in the back and take those big clothesline clamps and clamp your clothes on the line and let it air dry. The only problem with air drying the clothes is that once they dried, once you put your clothes back on, you smell like outdoors all day long. All day long, you smell like you were outdoors. Creatively, we have been a people that had to survive. I remember when I had a little tooth coming out, and my daddy took a string and wrapped the string around the tooth, and I didn't know quite what he was doing. He said, "Son, come here, I'm take care of this." Took a string and wrapped the tooth around the string, and once he got that string just right around that tooth, he pulled it a little bit, and the tooth was coming out on the string. He was a preacher and a dentist, in-house dentist. Amen. Creatively, we knew how to make it. And so then now, when you talk about creativity and courageous creativity, I believe that it was one wise writer that I remember reading who said that the creative is the place where no one else has ever been. You have to leave the city of your comfort and go into the wilderness of your intuition. And what you will discover will be wonderful, but more than that, what you will discover will be yourself. That when you allow creativity to saturate your life, you're going to discover some things about yourself. And what you're going to discover is your back is never up against the wall. Creative thinking is one thing, but innovation is another. I want y'all to know that you can't confuse creativity with innovation, because creativity is what you think about, but innovation is what you do. So our ancestors were not only creative, but they were innovators. They knew how to invent and how to come up with plans to make things work that ordinarily would not work. I'm trying to help somebody today who feels like their back is up against the wall, but you come from a people who were courageously creative. And I just want to share with you that there are 4 principles that you got to hold on to if you want to have courageousness with your creativity. 4 principles, and I'm done. First of all, creativity is such that you got to realize that God is calling you to it. What I'm trying to tell you is that nothing is going to ever be just like you want it to be. Nothing is going to ever always line up just the way you need it to line up. But understand that God is always calling us to creativity. He's always calling us to look around and do just what he did. He used what he had to bless the people who were following after his presence. When you look and you see in the Bible how creative in the Old Testament, how creative God was, that when you wanted to get a word to Belshazzar, he could show up physically in the party. So what he did was he took his finger and he wrote on the wall, Mene, Tekel, Perez, and sent a message to Belshazzar to tell Belshazzar that you have been weighed and found wanting. Creatively, he invaded and showed up. I'm reminded of when the 3 Hebrew boys was in the fiery furnace, and he didn't come down from the balconies of heaven to bring them out, but creatively, he sent an angel. They showed up in the fire, and they said, and he looked like the Son of God. I wish I had some help. God always calling us to creativity. That your back is never up against the wall. That regardless of what's happening with you financially, you can always figure out a way to make it. And I ain't talking about nothing illegal either. But God puts legal means around for you to make it. You just got to go pull on one of those gifts, one of those strands of gift and talents that he's giving you, and create a way to make it. Those of you who are struggling with academia and school, I was not the brightest cook in class, but I wasn't the dumbest one either. Education is not about how smart you are. It's about how motivated you are. And if you're motivated, you can compete with Einstein if you had to. If you're motivated, you can stand because you want something. You are hungry for something. Let me tell you something about creativity. You need to understand that creativity is such that you can't wait for creativity to happen, but you got to seek it. You got to breathe it. You got to invite it. You got to embrace it. You got to go get it. And too many of us are sitting back and we're waiting on God to do something that God has already done. He has put everything around you to make your reality happen. That somebody said happiness is not found, it's created. Do you walk around with your face hung down and your head hung down and you're talking about you ain't happy? Create your happiness. Create the environment that you need to sustain. Create the love that you need. Create the joy that you created. And do it courageously. You're called to it, but then you got to have the character for it. I believe that one of the reasons that God does not breathe on some of what we are doing is because our character ain't right for it. You got to have character for creativity. In other words, can God trust you with a bigger than life revelation? You sitting there praying for God to do it, but if he does it, can he trust you with it? So your character has to line up with where God is, and that you got to realize and you got to prove to God that he can trust you with what he's trying to show you. Your character has to line up. Then not only do you have to be called to it, have character for it, but then you have to have chemistry in it. What I'm trying to tell you is that your alignment with what you do and who you are have to combine and come together. Some of us are frustrated because we're doing stuff that don't fit us. When David fought Goliath and Saul tried to put his armor on David, David said, Saul, I can't fight in this. This is your armor. I got to fight in my own armor. That's because David was a slingshot thrower, and Saul was trying to make him a spearman. There were levels of fighters back then. Saul was trained to be a spearman and a warrior in that way. But David was trained on the backside of a mountain feeding his daddy's sheep. And all he knew was to take rocks and slingshots and throw them and use them in that manner when he would have to shoot at wolves and scavengers that would try to get the sheep. He knew how to shoot a slingshot. He said, I can't fight in your arm. I got to fight in my own. And the problem with some of us is that we're trying to be creative with somebody else's vision, with somebody else's call. But I like the way Emerson put it. And Emerson said, that the painter told me that nobody could draw a tree without in some way becoming a tree. Nobody could draw a child without studying the outlines of its form merely. The only way you can really paint a child is if you watch the child for a time, his emotions, how she plays. In other words, the painter has to enter into the nature of what they're seeking to draw to extract the meaning and its purpose. What I'm trying to tell you is that you got to become what it is you are wanting to be. You have to become what you're praying for. You have to say that I'm brave enough and I'm courageous enough to face it, to become it. This is why I want to get at. We ain't got no business killing ourselves. This is why we have no business drugging and drinking ourselves to death. I feel like preaching this morning. This is why we don't have the right or the permission to give up on life and give up on school and give up on our business and give up on. We don't have the right because we have courageous creativity on the inside of us. I want y'all to know I'm done. I want the ministers to get ready in just a few minutes. But let me tell you this, that you got to be called to it. You got to have character for it. You got to have chemistry in it. But then watch this. You got to have Christ to model it. That your creativity ain't much without Christ modeling for you. That's the difference between you and the drug slinger. He's creative, but Christ ain't in that. You know, Donald Trump, some of y'all may think he's creative, but Christ ain't in that. If the right creativity has Christ connected to it. You remember when that man was blind sitting by the road? I'm going to turn it over to Sunday school in just a few minutes. The man was blind and sitting by the road and could not see, and Jesus came and took some spit and put it in his hand and mixed it with some dirt and put it together and made what I would call a vaccine, a salve, and put it on his eyes, and his eyes were open and he could see. But he used what was right around him. What I'm trying to tell you is that when God is calling you and give you character and chemistry to be creative, sometimes what it is that you're trying to produce will get messy before it gets beautiful. And that's why you can't despise small beginnings and the days when you got to struggle through some things and fight through some things. It's going to get messy before it gets where it needs to be. You come from a people that's creative. And think back in your own childhood and in your own life how God used your mom and daddy and your parents to just make things work. This is why we don't have to kill ourselves. We don't have to jump off of buildings. We don't have to drink and drug ourselves to death. There's always a brighter way. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy does come in the morning.